Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about how to smile your way to Samadhi. So this is a continuation of the video from the past week about Kriya Yoga and the Great Fear. So just to recap, the Great Fear, this this religious idea that the Great Fear has to do with either the fear of death or the fear of continuous cycles of suffering, of reincarnation and suffering. And the Great Fear really being the fear of separation, so not feeling connected to the totality, to one's spiritual destiny. And as a result, feeling isolated, not knowing, what to do, needing, feeling this lack, this existential angst, if you will. And so one of the aspects about yoga and Kriya Yoga is Samadhi, the superconscious awareness. So in higher meditations, when people get into states like Samadhi, right, this sort of superconscious awareness, in effect, what happens is the boundaries of separation start to dissolve, and one experiences various levels of feeling unity, right? Often what happens with students with Kriya Yoga is that they can become very effective at doing their Kriya Pranayam, right? The main intentional breathing type of practice in Kriya. And they may go into Pratyahara, right? Into internalization. They feel this receding of the senses. They can feel their body feels as if it's like a shell or a shadow, or it disappears. They can get into the tranquil breath, which is where the breath starts to shallow out and then basically disappears. And one is in the breathless state, if you will, right? It's not truly breathless, but the breath is totally gone from your awareness and you become super internalized. And then one moves into a state of dharana, which is this internalized concentration. It's like an internalized void, right? And you become very internalized and you start to experience some things, right? So you may feel activation of energy flows within you. You may feel like this sort of kundalini awareness, right? Where you are, shooting upwards or expanding in all directions and whatever it is, right? As your awareness starts to become open to this sort of boundless perception, you start to have these deeper experiences. But often what happens with students is they can get into dharana, right? So they get into the tranquil breath, they get into this internalized void, and then they're just sitting there because they still feel separated. And the reason they still feel separated is because there's these psychological barriers that are holding, if you will, the perception of a greater awareness and a greater expanding awareness. So those limitations within really have to do with aspects of the personality that haven't been resolved, internalized patterns that have not been resolved, and they seem to hold us back. So students will often ask me, they get into that state, that dharana, and then what do they do from there? Now we know that Lahiri Baba basically said that after you get into the tranquil breath, no more Kriya Pranayam, no more intentional breathing, you let go of it. You're not trying to restart your breathing because you are in a super still state. But you may get into this sort of glass ceiling, if you will, of going, hey, I can't go beyond this internalized state, the super internalized state, there's nothing happening for me. Well, what you need to do at that point is to really let go and to engage and open yourself up. So the inner smile is a very effective means of just applying your open awareness with acceptance. And what that does is invites any patterns to basically resolve in your expanding awareness, right? So that can be a trick to get into dhyan, which is this sort of absorption, the state that moves beyond the dharana state, beyond the concentration on the internalized void. It moves you into dhyan, into this absorption where you just open yourself up and embrace whatever is there, right? Use the inner smile to engage with it, right? And then to allow it to unfold. And what you'll experience is something will start to happen, right? You can't pinpoint what is happening, but if you open your field, open your awareness, and just accept and engage, what will happen is things will start to appear in your meditation. These patterns of your personality and so on to basically dissolve and integrate, right? So, and from that point, you can then experience some very intense feelings or intense internal perceptions, right? And you might see an aspect of the divine in Ishta, right? Which is sort of a spiritual form, if you will. You might see that, or you may see other things within it. It's really unique to your own experience. But if you engage with it and open it up, you become absorbed in it, and you may experience a knowledge about certain things in your life, personal things, right? They're basically internal energetic patterns that are unresolved, and you have a perception about them as they dissolve into the greater awareness, right? So that process, you can allow that to unfold with the inner smile. That's sort of what often will move a student beyond the stage of being stuck in dharana, if you will, move them into absorption. And as they become more absorbed, and they become one with the inner perceptions, and they get into this samadhi, this superconscious state, right? But that's basically the process of unfolding. And that's why I teach the Taoist internal alchemy practices as well, and as a complementary to Kriya Yoga, because there are gaps within Kriya Yoga methodology where there are some students that are, more gifted, I guess, if you will, and they move right through, the yogic path, and they get into an internalization and they get into absorption, right? So they don't have a lot of limitations. In a way, it's like they naturally know how to let go and to allow internal patterns to surface and dissolve, right? But there are others that are very sort of more, they have more challenges with that progression, and then they get stuck in the dharana. Myself, I was one of those, right? So that I understand the process, where you can be very methodical with your particular practice, but then you don't know how to let go. You don't know how to have that inner perception of what you experience. Part of the reason for this is that we're really taught to repress things. We have this unconscious filter of trying to keep the internal patterns in check. We don't want to resolve them, we don't want to feel them, we don't want to know that they exist, right? You could call them the samskaras, the karmic seeds, but it's really internal patterns. So we aren't open to opening ourselves up and allowing them to resolve. We want to keep them bottled up, right? So it's this unconscious training that we've had, in our makeup. And I certainly had that, in my own experience. So knowing how to open that cork again, really the inner smile was a way that helped me to do that. But it's not so much the method of the inner smile or any particular method, it's the process, right? So you want to, when you get into that deeper internal state, right, through Kriya Yoga or other means, you want to open yourself up to engage, to accept, and allow things to spontaneously resolve. That's the essence of the spiritual evolution, if you will, in one sadhana, in one spiritual practice. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.